Hello everyone, my name is Michael McCann and welcome to part 5 of this Wayward Art Company tutorial for creating a character in Blender 2.77. So in the last one we had just finished our texture painting, and so now we can begin the fun stuff, which is the particle systems, creating all of the hair for our character. But before we begin that, we need to assign vertex groups to our mesh. So I'll come over to my Properties window and click on Object Data, and under Vertex Groups I'll click on this little plus sign, and which adds a new vertex group. So I'll just rename this one Body. And I can select these large areas at once because I still have my seams marked. So for the Body vertex group, I'm going to select everything except for the hands, feet, tail, and ears. And of course the parts of the mesh that don't have any hair at all, like the inside of the mouth and the nose. And I may also give the eyelids their own vertex group, and I want to deselect this loop around the mouth, which is the lips. But I think that should be pretty good. So I can just assign this, and just to double check it, I can select and deselect to make sure that that vertex group was indeed assigned. And now I'll add another one, and I'll just call this one Ears. And the ears are getting their own vertex group and particle system because the hair will likely be a lot shorter than the hair on the rest of the body. Okay, so I can just assign that. And I think also I'm going to give some longer hair strands, some tufts of hair coming out from the inner ears, like many animals have. So I'll just select a few faces at the base of the ear, and then add a new vertex group, and I'll just call this one ear underscore inner. Okay, and just make sure that that's assigned as well. And now I can move on to the eyelids. So I'll just select the eyelids and then deselect the loop around the eye itself because I don't want the individual strands going into the eye. Okay, so I'll create a new vertex group and just call this one Eyelids. Okay, what now? I suppose the tail. That one will be really easy to do. So I'll just select the whole tail and then add a new vertex group, call it Tail, and assign it. Now we'll do the trickier parts, the hands and the feet. Not that they're especially tricky, you just have to make sure that you don't assign anything to the claws or the pads on the bottoms of the hands. So you'll have to just select everything first and then deselect those pads on the bottom. And to deselect those faces, I can just use C, which is the selection tool. That's the hotkey for that. And then the middle mouse button will deselect all of those faces that we don't want added to that vertex group. Okay, so I'm nearly done. And this should be the last vertex group. We may come in and add another one later, but this will help. This will allow us to get started at least with the particle system. And I'll just call this one Hand/Feet. Now I'm going to go to my world settings and click on Use Nodes. And then at the very bottom, in the node editor, I'm going to click on the little World tab. and type Shift A and add a sky texture. And I'll also change the default lamp in the scene to a sun lamp, and then rotate it so that it shines on the front of our character. Whenever I'm working with any kind of particle system, I like to light the scene a lot. Even if I make adjustments to it later, it's important to see how hair strands react to world lighting and lighting in general. So, but now I'm going to give the character a material. And I have the Node Wrangler add-on enabled, so if you don't, you really should. It's a huge time saver. Just go to your add-ons and type in Node, and you can see it there. Just enable it and then save it. And now if I just type Control T, it adds the texture, the mapping node, and the texture coordinate node. So now I can locate those textures, and remember we have two that we painted, the character hair and the character texture, and I want the character texture. And now I can come to my particle settings and click New. And it still looks a bit dark in my scene, so I'm going to go to my lamp settings and just increase the strength of that sun lamp. Alright. Yeah, I think that will help us again to see the hair strands as we add them and how they react to light. So I'll go back to my particle settings and change it from emitter to hair. And I'm going to change the hair length so that it's really quite small, like maybe 0.04. Perhaps that's a little too small. Maybe I'll do 0.07. And then I'll take the number up to 3000 to start, but we'll be adding a particle or some children to that, so it'll be a lot more. But we need a material for our hair, so we need to go to our material settings and just add a new material. And then select the hair shader. And the hair node is interesting. So the best result you'll get if you duplicate it. And then add the two together. And so with the first one set to reflection, you can change the other one so that it's set to transmission. Okay, so I can just select one of those nodes and then type Control T, which again adds those texture nodes and coordinates. So we can find the character hair texture. And then just plug this into both of those hair shaders. And the first thing that you might notice is that the hair strands look more like cactus thorns than actual hair strands, and it's because the root size is too big. So if you scroll all the way down to Cycles Hair Settings, and actually it's all the way at the bottom, and we'll be using this a lot, so let's move some of the things up towards the top that we'll be using a lot, like children, and these Cycles Hair Settings, and Vertex groups. That way we won't have to scroll all the way down to look for these things. And also, currently the hair is applied to the wrong material. So let's just come in here and name these materials. The second one we will call hair. And the first one I'll just call skin. And now if I go back to the particle settings, I can switch this material to hair. And now I can change this root size to something much smaller, like 0.2. Okay, I think that might work. And then under vertex groups, I want to select body. And under children, I'll select interpolated. Now all of the hair doesn't show up in the viewport. I think only, yeah, the 10% are displayed now. So there will be quite a few more when you actually render it. So now I'm going to just tweak these settings a little because I think the hair looks a little short. And then once I get it to a length that I like, we can go into the particle edit mode and start actually combing the hair. But you really want to get these settings the way that you like them first, because once you go into particle edit mode and actually edit something, most of these options become unavailable from that point on. I think all of the options except for the children's settings you can no longer edit. So but get it how you like it first, and then go into particle edit mode. So I think that length looks good. So now I can start to actually comb it. I'm going to go back to the default view though, so I have one big window to work in. And I'll switch from object mode to particle edit mode. And if I type T, I can bring up my options, and I want to make sure that my brush is set to comb. And I feel like this part's probably pretty self-explanatory. I'm basically brushing the hair on this character the same way I would on a cat or a dog in real life. I'm just sort of following the sort of the natural sort of direction that those hair strands would go in. So the ones on the side of the cheeks, I'll just pull them back. The head is probably the most complicated part. You know, the rest of the body, it seems pretty natural just to, you know, comb the hair on the arms down, the hair on the legs down, the hair on the chest and back just down, and basically just following the lines and the curves of the body. In some areas, I am going to leave the hair strands sticking out a little, like around the neck, and some around the chest as well. But for the most part, everything else is going to get brushed down. And in your toolbar, if you check this little box that says children, you can actually see the children, which kind of gives you a better idea of what the what kind of editing you're doing. So you can do a little more fine detail on areas like the face and more clearly see what the actual result is. Alright, now I think I'm going to switch my brush over to the puff tool, and that just kind of it almost sort of undoes the brushing. So the puff tool just makes the hair strands stick out, sort of puff out a little. So I can do this on some areas like the back of the head. Maybe I'll comb the back down a little bit, but then puff the hairs around the chest out. Okay, maybe I'll switch to the length tool and make sure that it's set to grow. And I can just make the hair on the chest a little longer. Maybe puff that out a little bit. And then go to the cut tool and just shape it up a little. But that's starting to look like what I was going for. I'll do the same thing on the cheeks, just grow the hair out a little bit so that it looks a little more full around the side of the head. And puff that out as well. Okay, now that I'm finished editing that particle system, I can go back to my particle settings and go and find my children settings. And one thing that I want to do is I want to take the length down just slightly and then bring the threshold up. And what that does is basically it just makes it so that all of your hair strands are different lengths. So everything isn't so perfectly even. And one more thing in the children settings is the end point. I like to edit that for fur because it makes it look a little more fluffy. So I'll just take it up slightly. And it also adds a little bit of a bend or a curve to the hair, which I think makes it look a little more natural. Okay, so let's go ahead and name that particle system Body to match the name of the vertex group. And then we'll do the next one, which was Ears. And change it from emitter to hair. Make sure that you're not in particle edit mode. Click Advanced. And take the hair size down. Okay, yeah, I want the length to be a lot shorter than the rest of the hair. And I'll just take the number to 500. I'm not really sure if we'll use children, but we might. So I'll change my material to hair. And the vertex group to ears. I'm just going to go ahead and add the interpolated children, and then if it's too many hair strands, we can turn it off. And then of course take the root thickness down to 0.2. Sometimes you have these areas that look kind of patchy, so we can edit that. Maybe we can add a little bit of length in some areas and sort of comb over it to hide some of those patchy spots. Okay, so I'll go into my particle edit settings and then just comb that hair, sort of following the curve of the ear. And sometimes with working on a part of the mesh that's thin, like the ears, it's pretty easy to comb the hair into the mesh. So I'll just flip over to the puff tool and then just go around the edges, so it makes those hairs stand back up and you know, sort of come back out of the mesh. Okay, and we'll render this later to see if there's these patchy spots actually show up in the render, but they might not. Okay, so now let's do another particle system. This time we'll do the ear, those tufts of hair inside of the ear. So I think we called that one ear underscore inner. And the same way, just change it from emitter to hair. I think I'll just do 50 for the number, again because it's going to be just a few at the base of the ear. Change the material to hair and take the hair length down. Select the vertex group. And make sure to change the root size to 0.2. And give it children, although I'm not really sure if I'll keep the children on. Again, it's just like the ears. After it renders, if it looks like it's too many hair strands, we can always take the children off. So there's a few too many here in the center, in the middle of the head, so I'm just going to cut these hairs there in the center so that they're just, in front of the ears. And then I'll just try to comb them out like I sort of want them to be curved off to the side, I think. I guess just following the same direction as the ear, maybe sort of bringing them to a point. Yeah, it's kind of tricky. I think I'm trying to do sort of like an S curve so that they curve back into the ear but also off to the side. So it's a little tricky. Can't really seem to get rid of those hairs in the middle, which is another reason I really didn't want to use children for this, because sometimes it just sort of throws them in weird places where you don't really want them, like those on the top of the ear and in the middle of the head. But that's not looking too bad. Once again, we'll see how it looks once it renders, but I think that might be okay. Next, we'll add the particle system for the eyelids, because it'll probably be the easiest and the quickest. There's no particle editing to be done. No combing. It's just adding the hair strands and making sure that the length is really quite small. I'm going to go ahead and save my Blender file. And then I'll click Advanced and maybe make the hair length 0.2, 0.02 rather. And then I'll take the root size down to 0.2. and assign that vertex group, eyelids. And give it the correct material. Now it looks really short, but you know, we're only seeing 1 or 10% of those particles. So once we render it, you know, we'll see a lot more hair strands on the eyelids. And now we will do the hands and the feet. And I may not really do anything with the particle editing for this either. I'll probably keep the hair on the paws really short. So they really might not need the editing, but all of the settings are the same. The switching the material, assigning the vertex group, and of course the most important is taking the root size down to 0.2. So yeah, the hair on the hands and feet is going to be pretty short. We can come back and comb it later if we need to, but I think that it will probably not need it. I do want to do the children settings though, just to make them a little so that they're not so uniform across the surface, the hair length. I want it to be a little choppy. So I'll also adjust the endpoint as well as the length and threshold. Okay, so we're starting to run a little long in this one, so the tail is going to be the last particle system that we add in this one. And then we'll of course do more in the next video. But all of the settings are going to be the same. Only the length is going to be much longer. The hair on the tail is actually the longest hair on this character's body. So I suppose with the exception of the whiskers, which we'll give him in the next one. But all of the other settings are relatively the same. For the length, I'll do something like 0.44. But maybe even longer. I'll see after if we comb it and it looks like it could be longer, we can always add the length in the particle editing. Alright, so same as before, just following along with the curve of the geometry. Okay, so now that it's combed, I can come to my settings in the children, under the children settings. And one thing that you can do, because this hair is a little longer, and longer hair has sort of a natural way of grouping together, you can adjust this clump factor. And yeah, it sort of makes the hair group together in these little bunches, again, which is something that longer hair sort of just naturally does. So I also want to adjust the length and the threshold again, and also the end point. The longer the hair is, I feel like the harder it is to tweak the values to get, exactly what it is that you're, trying to achieve. And I just realized that we only combed one side of the tail. So, I'll just go back in and do this again. This time I'm actually trying to give it a little more volume, or a little more, I guess a little more, width and body to the tail. So maybe I'll switch to my puff tool and just bring the sides out a little to make it look a little wider. And almost give it sort of a diamond shape. Yeah, okay, so that looks pretty good actually. I like that better, I think, that it looks more fluffy. And I'm curious to see how this is looking, so I'm just going to go ahead and do a quick render of the mesh from a good angle to get the tail and the body, and that will probably be the end of this one, and then we'll pick up again in the next video and hopefully finish the hair, and then we can move on to the working on the eyes and then beginning the armature. Okay, so it's looking pretty good, but it could definitely use some improvement, which we'll do in the next video. So until then, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.